Introductions are always good because they get things kicked off. They get us launched. It's like listening to the Rolling Stones. Start it up. Everybody remember the Rolling Stones, or does that date me? Ruben and I have been doing the UFO thing for a really long time. And it's been an interesting ride. We started, I was doing a book on UFO cases in South Texas. This was around 2006. I had published a couple of other books in Texas, and my first two books were about the history of minor league baseball in Texas, which is another interest of mine. And my wife kept saying to me, you know, you really ought to try writing about something that people actually care about. My book sales were not doing too well on the baseball side. And I told her something like, but I'm really interested in baseball. It's America's pastime. We've had in Texas a really long and storied history of minor league teams, successful minor league teams, long before, you know, the major leagues even came down to Texas. Yeah, but she said, nobody really cares about that. Why don't you write something about ghosts or something about UFOs? So I know which side my braid is buttered on, so I knew I'd better listen to my wife. And so I started doing a book project at that time about strange events that had happened along the Texas-Mexico border. And I had a chapter that was going to be about UFOs, because we've had a number of very interesting UFO experiences over the years in Texas, and specifically in the area that I live, South Texas. And I had actually written 12 chapters of that book, and I was working on the UFO chapter. And one of the cases that I ran across, I was extremely interested in. It was about a reported crash of a UFO and a small plane along the Texas-Mexico border on August 25th, 1974. Well, at that time, back in 2007, there was only one person in the United States, in North America, that I could find who was doing anything with that case, and that's this gentleman that's standing right next to me, Ruben Uriarte, who lives in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so, you know, I had, in doing previous research, I had contacted folks that were working on different UFO cases, and very few, if any of them, had ever responded to my inquiries. But Ruben responded within 5 minutes of me sending him an email. So that was a first. And that was the beginning of a long relationship. We appear frequently at conferences together, which, since we live 2,100 miles apart, it's a real joy to be able to actually be together in the same physical space. And I think the introduction said something about they appear separately or together in various TV shows. Well, that's because separately makes more sense to production companies, because he's in California and I'm in South Texas. So that's why often you won't see the both of us being interviewed at the same time. So anyway, Mexico's Roswell was our first book, and I'll try to put this on the screen if the technology will comply. Mexico's Roswell is a very unique case, and it does have a connection to Area 51, which is our main topic of discussion tonight, and I'll explain why. As I mentioned, August 25th, 1974, there are actually people still living who remember that, of course. That's in more recent history. Trying to find, one of the other books we've written is called The Ultimate Guide to the Roswell UFO Crash, which continues to be the best-selling book at Roswell bookstores about, you know, the incident. But trying to find witnesses who were around 1947 and were directly involved in the Roswell incident is becoming extremely hard. Those who are still alive are in their 90s, it's difficult. But 1974, that's more doable. And we continue to have people who contact us, usually after we appear on Coast to Coast AM or Jeff Franz, or they see us on some of the TV shows. And in fact, a couple of years ago, we had this crash happened right on the Texas-Mexico border, just south of the Rio Grande River, near a small town known as Presidio, Texas. And just a couple of years ago, we had some individuals who were standing on the north side of the international boundary on the Texas side. And in August 1974, looking across, they were actually driving down the side of a mountain, coming back home from going to the hot springs that's located up near the top of the mountain. They were coming down and they saw the explosion in the sky that evening that marked the beginning of this case. So that was a very interesting book. Now, during the research for this book, there arose the theory that the UFO that collided in midair with a small plane that had taken off from El Paso International Airport in El Paso, Texas, the two objects collided over near the small town of Coyame, Chihuahua, Mexico, across the river from Presidio, Texas. The theory is that the UFO, which had been seen coming inbound toward Corpus Christi, Texas, at over 2,000 miles per hour, 2,500 miles per hour, and altitude over 70,000 feet, made a 90-degree angle turn without slowing down, headed south now along the Texas coast, got down toward Brownsville, Texas, which is close to where I live, made another 90-degree angle turn and entered Mexican airspace about 40 miles south of Brownsville. It went on across the length of Mexico, mainly over sparsely populated areas, and collided with this small plane just across the Rio Grande River from Presidio, Texas. And the thinking, one of the theories that's been proposed is that the object was on a trajectory toward Nevada, possibly back to Area 51, and that it could have been something that was being tested. If you plot out the course based on the documentation that we found during our research, if you plot out the continuation of the course of this object, it seemed to be headed toward this area. And so when Ruben and I were working on Mexico's Roswell, that was our introduction to the whole gamut of what Area 51 is, what it has been, its history. We started looking into that. And then we did our second book, The Other Roswell, a couple of years later. We found a retired Air Force colonel who lives near Wichita Falls, Texas, who told us that he chased one of those things and saw it crash near Del Rio, Texas. And as our research developed, it became a possibility that we explored that the crashed object that was retrieved by the U.S. military after the crash was brought here to Area 51. So we had those two links. So, sorry, I don't think I did anything. So the question then became, Ruben and I were not too familiar back then at that time with all the ramifications of what Area 51 was and, its history and so forth. So we've done a bit of research since then, and we've put together a presentation about it. And so tonight we're going to look at two things. Number one, how did Area 51 get started? I mean, what were its roots and what led to its development? What led to its early history? Number two, the second thing we're going to focus on is how is it, and let me preface this by saying that I've done extensive searches on UFO literature prior to 1980, and there was no mention of Area 51 in connection with any UFO cases. The hot base for UFO research among ufologists prior to 1980 was Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, as we showed. So there was no mention whatsoever that I could find in the published UFO literature prior to 1980 of Area 51. It was in the mid to late 80s that the connection began to develop. John Lear was a big part of it, and then, of course, later on, Bob Lazar. So we'll cover all that. So what we're going to look at tonight was, number one, how did the base come about? What is its history? Because history fascinates us on America's what was once highly secret and now is still probably one of the world's most secure bases. And the second thing, again, is how did it become connected to the whole UFO phenomenon? So I'm going to start off by just giving you some media portrayals. And I think in order to get the best view of this, I'm going to dim some of the lights. If everybody's okay with that, we're still getting good lighting from outside. Over 1988, we can safely say the link had been made between Area 51 and UFOs. Then, November 1989, we have the Bob Lazar story. George Knapp, investigative reporter here, did an interview with Bob Lazar, which we're going to watch just a few seconds of, in which he said that he saw 9 flying saucers housed in the southern part in a separate little installation in Area 51 while he was employed.
Lazar candidly discusses his classified work at the top secret research facility, S4.
I was hired to replace one of a couple people that were killed while working on one of the reactors from one of the crafts. Apparently they, for whatever reason, cut open an operating reactor and the device exploded, killing both of them. The S4 facility is an area just off the Papoose Lake bed, dry lake bed. It consists of 9 hangars. The hangars have sloped doors on them with a sand texture coating. The first disc I saw, I believe it was the second, or I think it was the third time I was up there. Upon seeing it, it struck me that, well, this explains all the UFO sightings. Not thinking that it was an extraterrestrial craft, that this must have been some advanced form of fighter that we've been working on for years, and people have just caught it being tested and so on and so forth. And it never even occurred to me, even though I was looking at an extraterrestrial vehicle, that this wasn't man-made.
So he went on to give more details of what was going on there at S4. And at one point he stated that he also saw a small gray alien standing in the room next to a human being as he was walking past. Just caught a glimpse. And this is where the red arrow you see is relative to Groom Lake over here, and this is where the S4 facility is, a few miles southwest of Groom Lake. There's been a lot of criticism about Bob Lazar, mainly about his academic credentials being suspect. However, nobody's been able to discredit this story. And almost everything that he said way back in the 80s is still, nobody's been able to discredit, and a lot of it has actually been verified. So recently he gave another interview in which he basically said that he stands by his claims, but he now regrets having spoken up about it because it has brought him nothing but pain and you know, it really hasn't helped.